Well, as testimony continues in the Lindsay Clancy murder trial, the case is increasingly coming down to what Clancy's mental health providers saw and what they may have very well missed in the weeks and days before her 3 children were killed. Clancy's psychiatrist testified that she saw no signs of psychosis or anything of the like during an appointment that day before the killings and did not believe Clancy posed a danger to herself or to others. The trial now entering day 13, underway as I speak. Joining us to discuss this and so much more is Shari Karney, nationally recognized victims' rights attorney and veteran trial attorney back here on the Live Zone. Ms. Karney, it is always good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. Always great to see you.
So this is somewhat of an unusual case, one that has drawn nationwide attention. A lot to unpack here, but what you have bared witness to thus far, what do you think? What's your take thus far?
So I call this case murder versus madness. So the question is, the prosecution is saying, although she had mental health issues, she was not psychotic, which meant that she had the intent to kill. The defense is saying that she was in a psychotic postpartum psychosis episode and could not take criminal responsibility or understand the consequences of her act. Here's what's so disturbing about this case. Let me unpack this a little bit. First of all, it's the battle of the psychiatrist and the shrinks, but some of the mental health care team seems so young, so inexperienced, and they're doing telehealth. Some of these providers, telehealth, I'm all for it. It's great for a skin knee, possibly weight loss, male pattern baldness. But for psychosis, intrusive thoughts, desperate depression, postpartum psychosis, ridiculous. And one of her providers said to her, when asked, well, I was here to give her emotional support. Emotional support on a telehealth appointment? Is that like a virtual hug? So the problem here is, was she psychotic or was she had a mental illness? But it doesn't take away criminal responsibility. The tragedy of this case is, one, I don't want to see a witch hunt of a woman, a mother, trying her best to have postpartum psychosis, being imprisoned for murder that she couldn't form the intent to do. On the other hand, I don't want a woman who is hiding behind the defense of psychosis to get out of murdering her 3 children. This is a terrible case. Mental health care is definitely on trial. But I feel that the prosecution's case is weak because it's a fine needle for a jury to thread, Guy. What's the difference between having mental problems and insanity, mental incapacity? It's very sophisticated. I also believe as a trial lawyer that this particular case, the jury already made up its mind 5 minutes into oral argument. As a trial lawyer, I find that we respond, a lot of the jurors, emotionally, even though they're supposed to apply the law. But it's a painful case.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say here, which is bothering me, is that we haven't focused enough on these children. As a trial lawyer and children's crusader, what about these 3 children strangled with an exercise rope? It's very stretchy. You have to use a lot of force to strangle. It's like a rubber band. And the children were found deceased face down. I mean, I don't think enough emphasis has been put on the suffering of these poor children and us as a society caring about them. And I also believe that we've got a bias toward women who aren't the perfect mother. In other words, a female jury is a double-edged sword. They can be both compassionate, but a lot of the time thinking, I had 3 kids. I didn't murder any of my kids, even though I wanted to. So I think this is a very tragic case. I think the law is so fine here that it's going to be impossible to, I believe, apply it correctly. Massachusetts law is even more fine, saying, at the exact moment of the killing of these children, she had to be criminally responsible. How do you thread that needle, Guy?
Yeah, it's a story in a trial that truly pulls at the heartstrings. Case in point, what took place yesterday? Shari, when we saw, well, Miss Clancy just sobbing as, well, the autopsy happened to be unveiled surrounding not one but two of her children. She started sobbing to the point where, well, the court had to go in recess and she had to be removed from the courtroom. I'm curious, as an attorney who has practiced for quite some time, and to your, with regard to your knowledge, was that the right thing to happen? What does that do for a jury? And I guess that's not the question I didn't want to pose. Is that the right thing? But how does that play into a jury? Does that help her, or does that help, let's say, the prosecution?
I think it's complicated, but I think it does help her in the sense that she's now seeing the consequences of what happened. And, you know, if you saw your three children deceased in autopsy with gruesome, exercise, wraps around their neck, along with a stethoscope, by the way, because she was a labor and delivery nurse. But I think it happens. I mean, it's very sad. And I do think the judge did the right thing, because I don't think you can leave a woman that distraught in a courtroom, literally having an emotional breakdown in some respects, and not have some empathy to give her a chance to recover herself. I think it could help the defense. I think that the prosecution is going to say they were crocodile tears. I think the defense is going to say at the time of this killing, she didn't understand this. When she first came to, she wondered if her family was going to visit her. This is a woman who's lost everything. She's lost her three children. She is in a wheelchair from having tried to commit suicide and broken her back. And her husband has remarried in 2026 to a fertility doctor. And so one of the things I think that's so devastating here is to watch this woman all alone, sobbing at the horror of what transpired. For me as a lawyer, it shows at the moment of that killing, she was in a psychotic episode and did not realize what she had done. I do think it helps the defense. And also, I feel the husband really was not as helpful as I personally believe he could have been. The situation to me looks like he went to his office in the basement, worked every day, and left three very young children with a woman completely struggling with intrusive thoughts, mental illness, depression, anxiety, sleeplessness. She's on 13 psychotropic drugs, Guy. I mean, and the doctors aren't communicating, the nurse practitioners aren't communicating, and he's barreled with his head in the sand in his office doing his work. I understand he has to work. I understand he has to support this family. But I don't feel he was supportive. And you see this lonely, lonely woman crying hysterically. And the judge had no choice, because if he lets her continue to cry, he may have to call a mistrial, because it's very prejudicial.
Ultimately, there's no happy ending with this story. It just truly pulls at the heartstrings. We'll have to leave it there. Yet again, Shari Karney, nationally recognized victims' right attorney and veteran trial attorney, joining us right here on the Live Zone. It's always good to see you, Ms. Karney.
You too, Guy. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. All right, folks, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.